Welcome, and thank you to everyone for joining us for this California Climate Investments webinar on funding opportunities available to farmers. As you may know, this webinar is part of a series, and future webinars as well as recordings of past webinars can be found on our California Climate Investments website under events. This webinar is in partnership with the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution District, who will be speaking on their administration of the California Air Resources Board's Farmer program, the HARP, and also in collaboration with Harpos Organics, who will be speaking on their project through the California Department of Food and Agriculture's Healthy Soils program. So in recent times, collaboration between tribal nations and the state has grown and fortunately continues to grow. Each era of California's history has brought different atrocities against tribal peoples, including land dispossession, discrimination, cultural impacts, and loss of life, to name only a few. To this day, many tribes continue to mobilize to preserve their culture and fight for restoration of their rights and their lands while forging new roads towards equity and autonomy. This trajectory reminds us that the march towards justice is at times fraught with long chapters of struggle. Tribal nations and all federally recognized and non-recognized indigenous people in California have been sustainably managing lands for generations and are in a unique position to offer insights on ways to protect the environment. We thank the tribes for their knowledge they create and share, and will work to uplift their efforts to protect, implement, and build upon the traditional, ancestral, and ecological knowledge and practices for the betterment of all of California. We invite our audience to engage with, interrogate present and potential impacts towards Indigenous self-determination, and assess what opportunities there are to learn from history and not only integrate but prioritize following the lead of our tribal neighbors. Further, as you listen to our presentation and think through potential future projects, please consider how you can better incorporate services to tribes, create meaningful partnerships, and ensure that your work pays respect to current tribal members near you. We hope our meeting today and our ongoing efforts with tribal nations will help better incorporate tribal viewpoints, the voices of tribal communities, in all decisions made in the state of California. Just an overview of a brief agenda for today. We have all the PowerPoint slides that will be shared today will be posted on our California Climate Investment website as an ongoing resource. And if you would like a copy of the presentation prior to its closing, please do not hesitate to reach out to us via email. Additionally, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted as well. So a little guidance on our question and answer portion of the webinar today. There are 3 ways to interact. First, you can send us a question through the Q&A function in GoToWebinar. You can also send us a direct message in Twitter, or you can email us. So this information is also available in the handout section, which should be on the right side of your screen, if you want to reference it at any point. We also encourage you to send in your questions throughout the webinar. You don't need to wait for the question period. We'll be speaking to the questions that attendees submitted during the whole webinar registration process and throughout the presentation at the end. So for those of you who do not know, the California Climate Investments is a statewide initiative that puts billions of cap and trade dollars to work reducing greenhouse gas emissions, strengthening the economy, and improving public health and the environment, particularly in disadvantaged communities. California Climate Investments include over 40 programs working to reach state climate and equity goals with a wide range of project types, including affordable housing, renewable energy, public transportation, zero-emission vehicles, environmental restoration, sustainable agriculture, recycling. You can see there's also much more. To date, 55% of California Climate Investments are made inside disadvantaged communities and low-income communities and households, which continues to exceed the statutory minimum of 35%. So before we jump into the funding opportunities, our speakers and I would like to get to know a bit about your previous experiences with California Climate Investments. We can be using these responses to inform the Q&A later in our presentation. So if you just want to take 30 to 45 seconds to respond to these questions. The first question is, have you ever applied for or received funding from a California Climate Investments program? Just give a couple seconds for folks to respond. It looks like most folks have not applied for a California Climate Investments Program, but we do have some folks who have applied and a few who aren't quite sure. So we'll learn more. The second question we have for you all is if you are familiar with any of the incentive programs that are offered through your local air district. To finish up this poll here, see what the familiarity is. Most of you say no, but it's a pretty good split. All right. So your best resources for California Climate Investments funding opportunity is really our website. There you can find all of the program pages for California Climate Investments that are organized by the applicability for the applicant, the eligibility for the applicant, I should say. You can access the California Climate Investments website at caclimateinvest.ca.gov. The link is here on the screen as well. Once there, you can click Programs, select Farmers to learn about the available California Climate Investment programs for farmers. We'll go over several funding and contracting opportunities today and provide the slides for your reference following the webinar. Before we jump into the highlighted programs, I would like to preface by saying that the following slides will hold a lot of information in a condensed format. Please do not feel pressure to absorb all of the information or take notes on all the details, since all the slides will be posted on the website listed here under events and webinars. If you require the slides sooner, again, please reach out to our team. You're also welcome to take screenshots if there's one that interests you. Other than that, just take this time to listen to these overviews and think about which programs might best suit your needs. We'll begin by highlighting two programs that are the most widely applicable and responsive to the needs that we have heard. Following presentations and Q&A, we'll highlight additional funding opportunities available to farmers through California Climate Investments programs. So our first highlighted program is called the Farmer Programs, Funding for Agricultural Replacement Measures for Emission Reductions. This program is funded through local air districts, which administer the Farmer Program for their region and select projects for funding. Local air districts receive the funds based on a formula and then award them to farmers and agricultural businesses for individual projects. Farmer provides funding for agricultural harvesting equipment, heavy-duty trucks, agricultural pumps, and pump engines, tractors, and other equipment used in agricultural operations. Equipment must meet the definition of agricultural operations, and the Farmer Funding Program is issued by local air districts throughout the state. Please note that not all air districts implement every type of eligible project under their Farmer Program guidelines. So for the most updated information on funding availability, the best place to go is to contact your local air district, and a directory is linked here. The next program is the Healthy Soils Program. We would like to make sure that everyone is aware of the Healthy Soils Program because it promotes the development of healthy soils on California's farmlands and ranch lands. There is funding available through this program, though current funding is not through California Climate Investments. The Healthy Soils Program has two components, the Healthy Soils Program Incentive Program and the Healthy Soils Program Demonstration Projects. The Incentives Program provides financial assistance for implementation of conservation management practices that improve soil health, sequester carbon, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The demonstration projects showcase for other California farmers and ranchers the implementation of those practices on the ground. Specific soil management practices that are eligible for funding include a suite of things, but are not limited to cover cropping, no-till, reduced till, mulching, compost application, and conservation plantings. The next round of applications are anticipated to open in fall of 2021. So we would like to spend some time talking about that first program, the implementation of the farmer funding, and how the application may work and the process along with typical funding levels programs can provide. So joining us today, we have Ryan Delmanowski, who is the supervisor at the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution District, and who'll be discussing more about the topics regarding farmers funding. Ryan has been with the San Joaquin Valley Air District for 3 years, and he has most recently become one of the Grants and Incentives Program supervisors. Throughout his time at the district, Mr. Delmanowski has worked on the majority of the programs in the heavy-duty section of the Grants and Incentive Department of the district. He's also been heavily involved in the advancement of the district's tractor replacement program. I'll hand it over to Ryan.
Great, thank you, Bailey. I appreciate all that. Hello, everyone. Once again, my name is Ryan Delmanowski, and I represent the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District. And mainly, I'm going to talk to you about, for the most part, what we call our tractor replacement program, which falls under farmer funding, and we fund a lot of our projects through the farmer program. And it's a really good program for anyone interested in replacing diesel-powered ag equipment. So if you go to the next slide, I can start going over it. To be eligible for the program, it doesn't really matter what type of equipment, even though we call it the tractor replacement program, it's really any type of diesel-powered ag equipment, like I mentioned. So it can be, wheel loaders, balers, cotton pickers, anything like that. The important part is that the equipment that someone is turning in to be replaced, it must be a self-propelled equipment, meaning it must drive on its own. It needs to be located, for the most part, within our boundaries. So basically kind of how we break it out is per year, we want to see about 75% of the operation within California itself, and then at least 50% of that operation within our district boundaries, which is essentially the San Joaquin Valley. Also, old equipment that you're turning in, it must currently be in use and in operational condition. So it can't be an old piece of equipment that's broken down already over on the, your back barn or something. It needs to be operational. You need to be using it currently. And we do require documentation to be turned in to prove that. So essentially, we will look for some what we call ownership and usage documentation, which shows that the equipment has been in use for at least the last 12 to 24 months. The equipment you're turning in, it must also be have a specific type of engine. So essentially, it needs to either have a tier 0, tier 1, or tier 2 engine in it. And kind of what that kind of breaks down to, if you're not familiar with engine tiers, is pretty much if your old tractor is roughly around 2004, 2005, give or take some there, 2004, 2005 and older, then it should probably fall under one of those engine tiers, and it'll probably be eligible for our program. So that's just kind of a good rule of thumb if you're not sure off the top of your head. And then also the horsepower of the old equipment must be 25 horsepower or greater. So if it's obviously less than 25 horsepower, it's not eligible. And also the new tractor that you're purchasing, it needs to be similar horsepower, and it needs to be at least 25 horsepower or greater. And then also the new equipment that you're purchasing to replace the old equipment, it needs to be the same type of equipment. So kind of the easy way to think about it is, if you're turning in a standard tractor, you need to purchase a new tractor. If you're turning in an old almond shaker, the expectation is you'll be purchasing a new almond shaker, things like that. Next slide. And then in terms of how we pay it out and how we determine the incentive amount we will give the applicant, we do a dollar per horsepower calculation. So what we do is we look at the horsepower of the new piece of equipment that someone's purchasing, and the horsepower amount will generally be around, fairly similar to the old horsepower amount. And so we'll take that new equipment horsepower, we will multiply it by a certain dollar amount depending on what category it falls in on this table that you see here. And then, yeah, we just calculate that out, and that what that calculation gives us pretty much is the incentive we will give the applicant. So kind of a quick, easy example is if, looking at this table, if your old tractor is 100 horsepower and the new one you're buying is 100 horsepower, that falls in our $350 per horsepower bracket right there in the middle. You calculate that out, that comes out to about $35,000. And once again, generally speaking, that would be the incentive we would give an applicant. The caveat to that, or the exception, is that the maximum we could ever pay towards a project is 60% of the total cost of the new equipment. So regardless of what this calculation gives us, when we go off of the horsepower, if that ends up being greater than 60% of the total cost, so maybe it's like 70% or something like that, we will cap that or bring it back down to whatever the 60% mark is, because that's the absolute maximum we can pay towards a project. And then on the flip side, if this dollar per horsepower calculation gives us less than 60%, so say it's like 50%, that's the amount we give you. So yeah, and once again, if you have further questions, that we can chat about that later. And then another quick thing about this program, which is very important to know, is that the program, it is a contract program, meaning you have to apply, go through the process, and receive a contract from us first before you can purchase your new piece of equipment. And right now, it is taking a little bit of a wait to go through the process. So if you were to apply today, you probably won't be getting a contract from us and be able to purchase your new equipment for about 8 to 10 months or so down the line. So there is some wait time because of the backlog and how popular it is, but assuming you're willing to wait that time frame, you have a very good chance to receive funding. Next slide. And then these are just a few other incentive programs that are ag related. I'll just briefly go through some of these. So one of them is our Alternatives to Open Ag Burning program. And essentially what it is if you are, or a farmer is removing orchards or vineyards, instead of burning all of those trees and all that wood, you can essentially chip that wood or grind it up and incorporate into the soil, and we will give you funding towards that. So as you can see here, we offer at $600 per acre with soil incorporation with a maximum of $60,000 per year, and then $300 per acre without soil incorporation. So if you're just spreading it on the ground, up to a maximum of $30,000 per year. And then the other program, we have a low dust nut harvesting program. So for essentially almond harvesters, if someone has an old almond harvester they want to turn in, we have a program where it's similar to the tractor replacement program I mentioned, but this one is just a flat incentive amount. So the new harvester that you'd be purchasing, we will pay a flat 50% of that. And then actually, if you are located within the city of Shafter, in the Shafter community boundaries, due to AB 617 and disadvantaged communities, we actually have a higher incentive for people in that community, which is 75% of the total cost. And then also we have an ag pump repower program, where if you have an ag pump with a diesel engine, that's tier 3, we can replace the engine with either a tier 4 final diesel engine, or we also have an option for a replacement to an electric motor, as well as if the electric motor is not connected to line extensions or anything like that, we also have funding towards the line extensions to get it hooked up to electrical. So once again, those are just a few additional programs, and you can go to the next slide now. And so if you have any other questions, feel free to contact me, or email us at our general email there, or give us a call at our general line. I know that was a lot of information, so feel free to contact us if you have any further questions about these programs or any other programs we have at the district.
Thanks, Ryan. So as a reminder, we'll be holding questions until the Q&A section at the end, but feel free to drop them in the Q&A features or direct message us on Twitter. I'd like to now invite our next speakers to talk about how they utilize their Healthy Soils grant at the tiny farm in Chico and create an agricultural parcel that is productive as well as sustainable. Joining us today is Pamela Posey and Alan Harthorn of Harphorse Organics. Pamela and Alan of Harphorse Organics are revitalizing soil health on 2 acres of walnut trees that have been farmed for more than 40 years. In their quest to restore the property from the ground up, Posey and Harthorn turned to the Healthy Soils program and received an $8,860 grant from the California Climate Investments with a $1,500 cost share to achieve their goals of improving the health of the soil and providing increased biodiversity. And I'll hand it over to them.
Okay. Hello.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, Bailey. All right, can we have the first slide, please? Thank you. Here's our tiny farm. The name of our project is Rebuilding Healthy Soil on the Urban Edge. And we are the first farm on the county line. So to the east of us, you see a row of the suburban houses of the city of Chico. And then just to the west, all outlined is our tiny farm of 2 acres. And we were very happy to receive the Healthy Soils Grant so that we can benefit the environment in several ways. We want to help sequester the carbon by achieving the planting of cover crops, applying compost, and planting hedgerow and windbreaks. This should result in additional benefits such as increased water filtration and changing the orchard floor management. It was just like a flat cement floor when we first bought the property 2.5 years ago. And we want to improve the air quality by reducing dust and by eliminating mowing with permanent ground cover, and to improve the ecosystem for the birds and the wildlife and insects and pollinators. So in the map of our land, you can, the blue outline, you can see the cover crop that was composted, so the 1.5 acres that received the compost. The green line on the east side hedgerow is 400 feet. The green line on the west side is the west hedgerow of 430 feet. And the red line at the back of the property is the north side of the property. And that is the windbreak that was planted of 160 feet. Next slide, please. So we're just going to run through the whole program here very quickly. And as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So here are some of the redwoods. They were 15-gallon redwoods that we purchased, as well as 5-gallon cedars. This is for the windbreak. And this was planted in fall of 2020. Next slide, please. And this is what the windbreak looks like now, the cedar and redwoods in June of 2021. So they're doing just fine. And I'll just keep reiterating that we've been in a drought for the last couple of years, so we've been having to rely upon irrigation and not rain to get all these goodies to grow. Next slide, please. And then we bought hedgerow plants. We bought 80 plants from Floral Native Nursery. So we bought 2 types of ceanothus, the frosty blue and Joyce Coulter. And then we bought elderberry, coyote bush, and flannel bush. So here they are as babies. Next slide, please. Here's Alan planting the hedgerow of March of 2020, and you can see the drip line going there between his legs. Next slide, please. And this is what the hedgerow looked like a few months later. So again, very dry, but it's growing, it's getting established. So that's what's great about native plants. Next slide, please. And then this is what the hedgerow on the west side looks like now. That's the flannel bush and a coyote bush. Next slide, please. And here's the hedgerow in March of 2020 on the east side, and you can see the row of fences of our neighbors' backyards that just back right up into our property, and they're very, very happy that we're keeping the property an orchard with the walnut trees, and then we're planting citrus trees and stone fruit trees too to bring about a diversity of crops there. Next slide, please. And here's the hedgerow growing on the east side. This is me, and this is December of 2020. You can see already how big the coyote bush and the elderberry behind me are growing. And then you can see one of the navel orange trees further back behind me too. Next slide, please. And then this is a very current photo of the hedgerow with the coyote bush and the elderberry bush, and they're already over 6 feet tall, so they're doing quite well on the drip irrigation. Next slide, please. And then moving into the compost to help the soil. So this was in June of 2020, so this was a year ago when we received 10 yards, 6 tons of soil, and this was from the worm farm out in Durham, California. Next slide, please. And we were very fortunate to have a neighbor who's a contractor, and he hired out himself and his Bobcat to spread the compost a year ago in June. Next slide, please. And then Alan, with our new BCS rototiller, tilled in the compost. And again, this is minimizing the need for expensive equipment, and this minimizes the need for regular mowing. And hopefully this will support the beneficial insect habitat, reduce the need for pesticides, and diversifies the cropping pattern. Next slide, please. And then here we are up to date. We have our new pile of compost. We're ready to spread for phase 2 of our Healthy Soils grant. And we've had to contact Fruit Growers Lab for the carbon to nitrogen ratio before we spread the compost. Next slide, please. This is our high-tech method of spreading the cover crop. So this was the last part of the Healthy Soils grant. So we bought red clover, purple vetch, and bell beans, and Al and I hand spread the seed. Next slide, please. And this is what the cover crop looks like a year later in June of 2021. Again, it's done very well despite the drought. And we were very happy with the cover crop that came up. Our soil is quite springy now. The butterflies are coming in, the birds are coming in. We've got lots of lizards, and we're raising a crop of chorus frogs, tree frogs to release into the environment too. Next slide, please. Okay, and then this is just a final picture of the cover crops. Last slide, please. And this is just a quick summary of the implementation log. For the first phase, we're in the second phase now. So we planted 100 native hedgerow plants. We planted 8 redwoods, 20 incense cedars. The cover crop was 100 pounds of bell beans, 50 pounds of purple vetch, and 15 pounds of red clover. And now we're on the second round of compost as well. So we are just trying to increase the viability of adding more crops to areas where our walnut trees have died or have been removed. And we're looking forward to sell our production at the local farmers markets and to have an on-farm stand. So we're really excited about enhancing the sustainability of our parcel. And we're really looking forward to having visitors so that we can show off what we've accomplished with the aid of the Healthy Soils grant. Thank you.
Thanks. So with that, we would like to move to the question and answers portion. And I invite our speakers to turn their cameras on and join us for that. In the meantime, I'd like to remind and encourage all of our attendees to ask questions, either through the GoToWebinar questions function, through social media. You can direct message us on Twitter, or you can email us at info@caclimateinvest.ca.gov. So with that, we'll start a couple questions. So a first question we have came in during the webinar. Reductions of greenhouse gases are mentioned as part of the focus of California climate investments. Are GHGs, greenhouse gases, such as CO2, taken into consideration for the farmer program? Specifically, the Carl Moyer eligible project, since the Carl Moyer program does not take into account CO2, but unclear to the question asker if the farmer program would take that into account. So the farmer program is administered by the local air districts, and they consider both greenhouse gas emissions and criteria air pollution reductions for project selection. So although not all individual projects have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the farmer program overall does reduce greenhouse gas emissions from agricultural operations. Is there anything you'd like to add from your perspective, Ryan?
Honestly, that was actually a very good answer. There's not much more I would need to add to that other than that. Yeah, greenhouse gases are reduced as a result. However, they may not be necessarily like the main focus of it. You know, nitrous oxides and things like that tend to be kind of the main focus, along with the Moyer program, like you mentioned. However, greenhouse gases are reduced as well throughout, you know, those types of projects.
All right, there's another quick question. We'll just tackle this one about the farmer program, and that is, when is the next farmer grant application period open? And because this program is administered again by local area districts, they all have different application periods and requirements. So wherever you are, contact your local air district, and they will let you know when the next application is open. And if you have any trouble determining who to contact with your local air district, please let us know. Let's switch to a question about the Healthy Soils project. There's a question from our registration process. Is there any funding for small organic no-till farms? How can beginning farmers access funding and sustainable education on land stewardship? I think this is a really great question. So although funding is not available specific for the organic certification piece, many of the practices used by organic farmers are funded by the California Climate Investments Program because of the ability of those regenerative soil practices to enhance soil carbon retention and reduce on-farm fossil fuel use. So, for example, no-till farming and other regenerative practices are covered under the funding opportunities eligible from the Healthy Soils Program, which is likely to have funding available in the future. It can be tricky for new farmers, but resources are available to start fresh out of the gate with sustainability practices. Local organizations can be really helpful with this, from growing efficiency to safety, such as the importance of using ground fault circuit interrupters or outdoor electrical safety considerations for electrification projects on farms. The UC Agricultural Natural Resources, or UCNR, the UC Cooperative Extension in your county, and the resource conservation districts are all really great sources. Academic advisors also from the UC Extension work with farmers to implement efficient growing methods, resolve pest problems, do smart water use, and help with carbon farm planning. Pamela and Alison, is there anything you'd like to add about small organic farms or non-certified farming operations that are seeking funding for reducing their carbon footprint? I think you may need to unmute yourself.
There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, we've been certified organic farmers for many years. This new farm that we have is not yet certified, but one of the things that we've learned over the years is that the National Organic Program requires maintenance of some sort of native habitat on organic farms. And that's a new thing in the inspection part of the certification. And so the accreditation agencies like CCOF or Oregon TILT are all looking at the other natural resource practices that you are doing on your farm. So these hedgerows and windbreaks are an excellent opportunity, the cover crop, of course, as well, to meet those requirements for, as Bailey said, regenerative or just, you know, kind of reestablishing the biodiversity of both your terrestrial and your aerial habitat. It does so much for the soil and the soil organisms, as well as all the birds and bees and lizards and everything else. So highly recommended, and it's something organic inspectors are always very happy to see it when you have these things on your farm.
Excellent. Another question that we got through the registration process was whether financial incentives for are there financial incentives for applying for farms owned and operated in disadvantaged and low-income communities, which is a great question. The California Climate Investments Program, the one covered in the webinar, the ones that we covered, the Healthy Soils Program and the Farmer Program do prioritize projects to priority populations, which are disadvantaged low-income communities and low-income households, as well as socially disadvantaged groups. And these groups these programs may provide increased incentives or priority points. The CDFA program, the Healthy Soils Program, provides resources on incentives related to loans for socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers through their farmer resource portal. If you're looking to combine that or do something outside of the CCI program. Ryan, do you have anything to add about the opportunities for low-income and disadvantaged communities through the Air District?
Yeah, so yes, first off, we have plenty of opportunities and different incentive programs for people located in those communities. We pretty much we don't have like necessarily special additional programs or anything like that, but just through all of our normal programs like the tractor replacement program that I mentioned, there is a emphasis on applicants located in those communities. So actually an example would be, I kind of just briefly covered it, but for our low dust nut harvester program, for the applicants located in the Shafter community, which would fall under AB 617 designated disadvantaged community, we actually have a higher incentive rate for those projects. So I guess kind of a quick answer to that would be, yes, we have plenty of opportunities for people located in those locations, and in some situations we actually have higher incentive amounts or things like that for if you are located in those communities.
Great, thanks. We have a question for Tiny Farm folks. So it's actually a two-part question. The first is that the farm looks like a great project, some good decisions about conservation best management practices. Did you get support from a local RCD or other free technical assistance that helped drive the planning process?
Yes, as a matter of fact, through the RCD and Point Blue Conservation, we went to the seminars that they had set up to explain the Healthy Soils program, and we immediately made contact with the person from Point Blue Conservation who was helping walk people through the process, and that was invaluable for us. It's not like we haven't done these types of things before, but coming from CDFA, it was a new proposal process, and all of the details were kind of hard to put together the first time, but Point Blue Conservation did a great job of guiding us through, answering our questions, and helping us develop our plan. So that was a big help.
That's really great to hear that they were such a good partner. Follow up to that is, how do you feel that the Tiny Farm has benefited from the CARB funding and CDFA funding? How would your farm be doing without it? It's a big question.
The management of the floor of the orchard is something that we recognize that on 2 acres, we're not going to make a living raising old walnut trees. And ultimately, we recognized that we needed to convert to other crops. We're planting some other citrus and stone fruits, as Pamela mentioned. And we've got some garden areas. We've got a greenhouse now, and we're starting a little bit of nursery. So had we not gotten the grant, we probably would have been struggling with weeds like nobody's business. As it is, the cover crop kind of dominated the weeds. and really kind of covered it up and knocked it down. So that's all been very good for us. The bottom line is that we needed to change our soil practices one way or another. We probably would have been disking and mowing and doing a lot more mechanical manipulation of the soil to control the weeds. So this has allowed us to just, as Pamela said, step back, have a light touch on the soil, let the kind of the pores of the soil develop and the roots of the cover crops get down in, and then we'll start incorporating that material later on. But had the grant not been available, we probably wouldn't have initiated the cover crops this soon. And like I said, we would have been struggling with a weed problem that I don't even want to think about.
Well, I'm glad that you got the grant. A couple of questions came in from the webinar about during the webinar about electric tractors. A question if there's funding possibilities for replacing diesel tractors with zero emission or electric equipment. And the answer is yes. Farmer does offer these opportunities. Most of the equipment they funded have been Tier 4 engines, which are combustion engines, but electric is eligible, and they've recently received their first applications for electric tractors. Ryan, do you have any words of wisdom on electric tractor equipment?
Yeah, so I do want to clarify on that. While there may have been maybe recently some projects for electric tractors, for new electric tractors, maybe some other districts did it. The San Joaquin district, we actually haven't. We haven't had any projects, and we actually do not. At this point in time, the program isn't set up for people purchasing new electric tractors. And without getting in, too far into the weeds or too much detail, while the farmer funding does allow it to happen, there are some limitations to us as a district in terms of essentially we have to take those projects on like a case-by-case basis. So it's not just like a standard project we would go through, and it would be kind of, like I said, fall into this case-by-case category, which are kind of, I guess they're kind of like special projects that are more something that we don't get official credit for the reductions that we get, and getting that credit is extremely important for what we do. So we actually see the reduction numbers that we need to get to. So because of that, at this point in time, we actually here at the San Joaquin Valley District, we do not have really opportunities for the electric tractors. I mean, there are other programs for electric equipment. I mean, I mentioned the ag pump program, where we do allow diesel to electric motors. We have an ag UTV program where if you have a UTV or ATV, an old gas or diesel one, you could turn that in for a new electric UTV, things like that. But specifically for the heavy duty program for tractors and ag equipment, at this point in time, unfortunately, we don't really have an option for like electric tractors, for example. We're hoping in the future, and hopefully not too far down the road, that could potentially change. But just the way the farmer guidelines are all set up at this point in time, it's not an option currently, unfortunately.
Just highlighting the importance of how different districts can do things a little differently based on their needs and limitations of that program. So you heard from San Joaquin, it sounds like zero emission electric equipment is generally eligible for farmer funding, but there's other opportunities. And then another note that just farmer can provide additional funding for infrastructure, depending on your local air district, such as like charging stations to support the zero emission equipment. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up Q&A and tell you a little bit more about additional funding and resources we have. So our panelists can go back into the ether and turn off their cameras, and we'll learn a little bit more. So we wanted to make sure to highlight a few additional programs and resources available to farmers, ranging from federal to state funding. We don't have much time to go through these in depth with all the programs, so again, don't feel pressured to absorb all of it. These slides will be posted. And as a reminder, the best resource for California climate investments is the website again. And there's the farmers button and the on the programs where you can learn more about this. So one program is the low income weatherization program. They have a farm worker housing single family program funded by CSD, the Department of Community Services and Development. They support installation of energy efficient equipment and measures upgrades like solar PV and health and safety improvements for farm worker dwellings at no cost to the residents. So farm worker households within Imperial, Fresno, Kern, Madera, Merced, Monterey, Riverside, San Joaquin, Santa Barbara, Stanislaus, Tulare, and Ventura counties, so the whole valley, are eligible to apply. Applications are accepted on a rolling basis with limited technical assistance throughout the application process. The next program we wanted to tell you a little bit about is SALC, or the Sustainable Agricultural Land Conservations. It funds projects to protect at-risk agricultural lands from conversion to more pollution-heavy land uses such as residential or commercial development, and reduce the transportation emissions associated with that. The program provides two types of awards: planning grants and conservation easements. So easement funding is available to local and regional governments and nonprofit organizations. The planning grants are available to local governments in collaboration with other organizations such as land trusts, open space districts. To apply for this program, pre-proposals are required. The pre-proposal for acquisition projects have passed. So if you have already been approved for that, the pre-proposal for planning projects, if you've been approved for the acquisition projects, the grant proposal official full will end September 10th. For planning projects, it's still open until July 1st. We can move on to the next program. Community air protection, CAP. Community air protection incentives support infrastructure projects, stationary source projects, and unique community identified projects in selected communities through the AB 617 process. CAP also provides incentive grants that help owners of older, higher polluting vehicles and equipment replace them with newer models that have lower or zero emissions. The program is administered by the local air districts, again, and after which the districts will conduct an eligibility analysis before evaluating and selecting funding projects, and those funding amounts vary widely across projects. Another program to briefly highlight is the CVRP Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, and that promotes clean vehicle adoption by offering rebates to consumers up to $7,000 for purchase of new eligible zero emission vehicles, including electric, plug-in hybrid electric, and fuel cell vehicles. They also offer fleet rebates as well, so businesses are eligible for a one rebate per lifetime of up to $4,500 per vehicle. Another program on electrifying vehicles is the Hybrid and Zero Emission Truck and Bus Voucher Incentive Program, known as HFIP, and that provides incentives for clean trucks and buses. And these are point of sale discounts to power California communities and drive commercial technology transformation. So funding opened this morning, June 8th at 10 a.m. And if you haven't already, you can submit your application vouchers through that system. There is going to be a high demand for this program, so it's 10 a.m. So if you can get them in quickly, do it as soon as possible. The last program we'd like to highlight is, next slide, SAFER, the Safe and Affordable Funding for Equity and Resilience program. Is driven by collective responsibility. Water systems, nonprofit organizations, government, and community advisory boards and stakeholders, they all work together and they develop and implement water solutions. They use a set of tools, funding sources, and regulatory authorities to proactively identify and reach out to water systems that are out of compliance and walk them through the SAFER application process to collaborate on short and long-term solutions which are developed with community input. The applications for this program are accepted year-round, and there's no cap on funding amount. So that is another opportunity. So with that, we'd like to share a few key portals for identifying current funding and contracting opportunities relevant to you. In this presentation, we've highlighted funding and contracting opportunities that will be available as far as a year from now to long-term planning. However, if you would like to identify solicitations currently opening, we have our funding wizard. The funding wizard synthesizes local, state, and federal grant and rebate incentive opportunities for funding sustainability projects. To search for opportunities, you just visit the funding wizard website, where you can see the search tool on the homepage, and that site is fundingwizard.arb.ca.gov. The other great resource we have is the California State Grants Portal. The State Grants Portal is operated through the State Library, is a great way to search competitive and first come, first serve grant and loan opportunities offered by the state. To search for opportunities on this, you just visit the State Grants Portal website, grants.ca.gov, where you'll be prompted to enter information to best match you with available opportunities. So the State Library is bringing you more than just books. All right, lastly, we wanted to share the Office of Environmental Farming and Innovation webpage under the CDFA website. This website provides more information on specific programs and videos to previous grant awardees. You'll also be able to access email subscriptions and current updates. The mission of the Office of Environmental Farming and Innovation is to serve California by supporting agricultural production and incentivizing practices that result in net benefit for the environment through innovation, efficient management, and science. We also wanted to highlight their technical assistance program. The TA, technical assistance, is important for preparing competitive proposals and applications and providing support that can range from capacity building to implementation assistance. We've heard today how important that assistance can be. The Technical Assistance Grant Program is not currently accepting applications, but we do encourage you to keep out for future technical assistance opportunities. So before your wrap up, I just want to call your attention to another ongoing effort here with California Climate Investments. CARB is working with the Department of Finance to develop our 4th investment plan. The investment plan is a high-level document that identifies priority investments that will help California achieve its greenhouse gas emission reduction goals while realizing additional health, economic, and environmental benefits. The 4th plan is due out in January of 2022, so it's next January, and a draft will be released later this summer, followed by a series of public workshops where we'd love to hear from you to understand your priorities for future funding from California Climate Investments. You can subscribe to our listserv to receive updates on this process, and you can feel free to reach out directly if you have any questions. So before we jump off, our speakers and I would like to wrap around with another exit poll. So we're going to take about 30 seconds to respond to these questions that are here. The first is, today, I learned about a funding opportunity I would like to apply to, whether immediately or further down the road. And this is a question you can agree with, disagree with, or neither. So we'll wrap up this first question here. You want to submit your final answers. So most people learned something. That is great to hear. Job done. That's a success. So thanks to everyone for answering this. The next question would be, would you like to be subscribed to our California Climate Investments bi-monthly newsletter? Clicking yes or no does not subscribe you to the newsletter, but this is just the inquiry of how interested you would be. So you can click whether or not you'd like that. We'll finish up with this second poll. And the answer is yes. Everyone wants to be on the newsletter, with a few exceptions. So to wrap up, some final reminders, most of which I've said, but just to remind you, all of what we talked about today, most of what we talked about today will be found on the website, California climateinvestments.ca.gov. These webinars are also being recorded and posted on that website for those who want to see them again, or if you don't, someone wasn't available to participate, they can also view that. You can follow California Climate Investments on social media at CA Climate Invest, and you can get all of the latest news and updates. We'd also invite you to give us feedback on your experience during this webinar. These webinars are created out of an effort to streamline information for potential applicants, and we're eager to hear from you whether it went well and what could benefit from further improvement. There's a short survey following the end of the webinar, and we hope you'll take the time to participate in it. Those who submit a response will be automatically entered in a drawing to win a $25 Visa gift card. I might take the survey myself. I'd like to once again ask, just to thank the speakers for presenting, and lastly, I'd really like to just thank all of you for joining us today. So in the chat, you can see our awesome survey and take that. And with that, I'll wish you all a great day.